powered by Alienware.
Introducing the Area 51 Threadripper Edition with a liquid-cooled 16-core AMD Ryzen processor that's ready to overclock. Learn more at Alienware.com.
Horror video games have come a long way from their humble beginnings as blurry, pixelated oddities that frankly couldn't scare your nearsighted great aunt, to today's 4K and virtual reality games that transport you effortlessly into some of the most hellish, visceral, and genuinely terrifying experiences of your life. From zombies to jump scares. Let's take a look at the evolution of horror games. A number of early video games attempted to add elements of horror into their adventures, but the first big breakout success of a purely horror-focused game was Alone in the Dark. While by today's standards it might seem quite tame visually, the true power of Alone in the Dark came from the constant fear it instilled in the player as they agonized over every moment. The player moved slowly and felt vulnerable at all times, but you're driven forward as the sordid story of the mansion unfolds around you. Alone in the Dark would inspire many of the games that followed, including the now infamous Resident Evil. The first game in the now long-running franchise not only looked spectacular for its time, but it also made the player far more involved. While Alone in the Dark was played quite passively and the story and horror unfolded around you, Resident Evil put the player into the driver's seat and let them be more interactive with the world in a way that went far beyond what a horror movie could hope to achieve. Like many of the best horror games over the years, it took full advantage of the latest technology to push forward what could be done in-game. While many developers still fumbled to come to grips with new tech, Resident Evil took full advantage and made something that, for its time, was outstanding.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
Resident Evil opened the floodgates for the survival horror genre of gaming, and many similar titles were released, but it wasn't until 1999 that Konami released their long overdue foray into the genre, Silent Hill.
But from what I can tell, something bizarre's going on.
This game brought everything great about Resident Evil's bleak and mysterious tone and combined it with outstanding writing and storytelling to create one of the most disturbing video games in history. Visually, Silent Hill also upped the game with stunning use of real-time graphics rather than pre-rendered backgrounds to make the game even more immersive. It was a genre-defining moment for horror games, and just like Resident Evil, it spawned a series of sequels. However, in the years to come, interest in the horror game genre began to wane, and although a new Resident Evil or Silent Hill might revitalize it for a short time, it would inevitably thither and fizzle. A couple of other titles like Fatal Frame would serve as a last hurrah for the classic survival genre, but by the early 2000s, it was all but dead in the water. Some scary games existed, but they were much more of an action-adventure style of game, and it wasn't until Doom 3 actually took an action game back into the horror story direction that a new interest in horror gaming began to emerge.
There is no death for you.
Resident Evil 4 also combined the action-adventure elements into its traditional horror by creating things like the over-the-shoulder camera for more effective aiming and fighting, but this created a new problem. By making the player a more effective fighter, it also made the monsters less scary by definition. Now, rather than running or avoiding the creatures, players wanted to fight, and this meant the horror element of the game was reduced to little more than jump scares, blood, and gore. Similar games like Dead Rising would come out in the years to follow, but it wasn't until the release of BioShock that the fusion of action and horror storytelling could really begin to gel together. BioShock elevated the storytelling of this new form of horror in the same way Silent Hill did with its classic style. It brought in new elements of politics and philosophy and used them as tools to terrify. Its setting in Rapture was eerie and beautiful, but somewhat relatable at the same time. It felt like somewhere that could exist in the real world, and what made the game truly terrifying was not the monsters or even its big daddies, but rather seeing humanity's descent into madness through those you meet or hear about in-game. And then to actually play the game and survive, you need to follow the same path as those who came before you. You need to kill and genetically modify yourself, and all the while seeing exactly where the path leads. BioShock was a huge step forward for the action horror genre, but horror purists were still left a little bit wanting, and the poor reception of the recent Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark sequels did little to help matters. It wasn't until Dead Space was released that traditional horror fans got something that would really make you want to sleep with the lights on. With Dead Space, you could actually see how much it had learnt from the games that came before it, as it so wondrously improved on nearly every aspect of its predecessors. The isolated feeling found in classic games, the moody lighting of Doom, the over-the-shoulder camera, it all came together in a great package masterfully with tight controls and brilliant design. It was a major success and brought about a new era of horror games. In the years to follow, titles like Amnesia, The Dark Descent would find success as well as other horror games like Left 4 Dead, but eventually, something new entirely began to emerge in a world of horror games. Enter Let's Plays. The dawn of the Let's Play and later streaming revitalized horror in a new way. People loved watching other people get scared. Certain games like Outlast or Amnesia became insanely popular off the back of this content, and a whole new form of horror game was born. Titles like Five Nights at Freddy's got massive amounts of attention from popular Let's Players and would see insane sale numbers off the back of their content. These games packed in jump scares to get the biggest reactions possible from the YouTubers and streamers, evolving with their content, and began to churn out games as fast as they could make them. But for horror purists, this was another step away from those classic games they loved. Many genres in horror now exist, and there are some great games out there, but today, technology is beginning to give us a new way to absolutely terrify ourselves. Virtual reality offers the most immersive and visually stunning form of horror imaginable. More immersive than any movie, more interactive than any previous game VR offers, the potential to terrify even the most seasoned horror fans. The immersion provided by a smooth virtual reality experience is unmatched and will undoubtedly have you ripping the headset off in terror, only to put it back on 30 minutes later as the desire to delve deeper into the story gets the better of you. Outside of virtual reality, other horror games are also taking advantage of the power of modern gaming PCs to deliver the most terrifying experiences to players. Players with high-end machines can comfortably handle huge hordes of zombies on screen without drops in frame rate, or create more realistic visuals to make the experience all the more immersive and real. With 4K gaming on titles like Dying Light, BioShock Infinite, and Doom, adding so much more to the experience, it's amazing to look back at Alone in the Dark and see just how far we've come. Even in a single series like Resident Evil, to look at the original and then its latest incarnation, it's a stunning change. There are many other horror games we didn't have time to get into today, but which is your favorite? Does Slender Man give you the creeps, or does Outlast leave you cowering behind a blanket? Let me know in the comments below. As always, this is Dashvikar saying thanks for watching. Enjoy the game. Powered by Alienware.
Introducing the Area 51 Threadripper Edition, with a liquid-cooled 16-core AMD Ryzen processor that's ready to overclock. Learn more at Alienware.com.